Hi, Phanessa here. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to knit this shawl here. This is the Tera Shawl. It is a beanie and shawl combo, so it's a set. It uses Lion Brand's Wool Ease Thick and Quick, and this color here is terracotta. And I added tassels in the corner. So this is Mandala Ombre. It's by Lion Brand. I really love this yarn. I've made a knit shawl with the blue color. I forgot what the name was. This one's Felicity. So it's a worsted and it's 100% acrylic, but it's really soft acrylic. Okay, so I'm going to use a US 10.5. This is 6.5 millimeters. So it's a little bit larger than the recommended needle size, but I want my shawl to be a little drapey and loose. I almost went with the 8 millimeter, but I think I'll just stick with 6.5. So starting on row 1, it says cast on 3 stitches and purl all stitches. So I'm going to cast on 3 stitches. So there's 3 right there. And it says to purl all stitches. And this is going to be the wrong side. Okay, row 2 is the right side. We're going to knit 1. And then I'm going to place a marker here after the first stitch to let me know that this is the right side of my work. And you can just clip a stitch marker in the front of your work when it gets a little bit bigger. So it's knit 1 KFB. So I'm going to knit 1 stitch, and then without pushing this stitch off, I'm going to insert the needle through the back loop and knit that stitch as well. And then last stitch, I'm going to slip 1 knitwise. My yarn's in the back. Okay, so as if to knit and then pull it off your needle. I'll show you that again. Insert your needle as if to knit and then pull it off. Okay, now we're going to turn. Row 3, we're going to purl 2, 1, 2, and then we're going to knit the next stitch. I'm just going to slide the marker over and then purl the last stitch. So this is the wrong side. You're always going to purl the first and last stitch of the wrong side. On the right side, you're going to slip the first and last stitch as if to knit. So row 4, slip 1. So I place this here. I know that this is the right side in case I get lost if I had to put my work down. Now I'm going to knit 1. And then on the right side, you're always going to KFB 1 stitch before the last. So knit 1 in the front and knit 1 in the back. Again, first and last stitch on the right side is going to be slip knitwise with yarn in the back. Row 5, you're going to purl the first and last stitch. So purl, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1. So on the pattern it says purl 1, knit 1 twice. So it's purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1. And I'm going to just slide my marker and purl the last stitch. So when you slip the stitches on the edge, it gives it a nicer, cleaner edge like this right here. So right here, this is where I'm slipping the stitches, and on this side as well. So see, I just put this down and I already forgot where I'm at. So I know that I'm on the front of my work, especially in the beginning little corner. It's hard to tell where the front and back is. Okay, so row 6, slip one knitwise as always. When you're on your right side, slip one knitwise for the first and last stitch, and then I'm going to knit one. Okay, so now we're going to start slipping the stitches in between the edges purlwise. So those are these slip stitches here. Anything on the outer edges where we slip knitwise on the right side, anything in the center, so between the edges, when we slip a stitch, it's going to be slipped purlwise, and then with the yarn in the back on the right side and the yarn in the front for the wrong side. So you want the yarn on the wrong side at all times. So I'm going to slip the next stitch. My yarn's in the back. I'm going to insert my needle as if to purl and pull it off. Again, the stitch before the last is always going to be a KFB. So knit front back and then slip the last stitch knitwise. Row 7, purl 1. We're going to knit 2. And then this is the stitch that we slipped on the other side. See how we have this strand here? That's because we did not knit this one here, we just slipped it. Now you want to make sure your yarn is in the front when you're slipping this next stitch. So wrong side it's in the front, right side it's on the back. The thing to remember is the slipped stitches, the strand is always on the wrong side of the work. Okay, so now I'm going to knit the next stitch. And again, the last stitch is purl. Row 8, we're going to slip one knitwise, knit 3. So you're knitting across until the last 2 stitches. The stitch before the last, KFB, and then last stitch slip knitwise. Row 9, purl 1, knit 3, 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to purl 1 here. This is the stitch that we slipped twice. Again, this column here, these slip stitches, it's always going to be a slipped stitch or a knitted stitch on the right side. So because we're on the wrong side, we're going to purl this stitch so that it appears as a knit stitch on the right side. Now I'm going to knit the next stitch and purl the last stitch. Row 10, slip the first stitch, knit 1. So here's that column of slip stitches and knit stitches. I'm going to slip purlwise with my yarn in the back. I'm going to knit 2, stitch before the last, KFB, and then slip the last stitch knitwise. Row 11, purl 2, knit 3, 1, 2, 3. Now we slipped this stitch on the right side, we're also going to slip it on the wrong side. Every time we slip our stitch on the right side, we're slipping it on the wrong side. You just want to be careful to make sure that your yarn is in the front here when you're slipping the stitches on the wrong side. Now I'm going to knit, and then I'm going to purl the last stitch. Row 12, slip the first stitch. Now we're just going to knit across until the last 2 stitches. Next stitch, KFB. Last stitch, slip knitwise. Row 13, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. So on this purl stitch, we're actually going to start another column of the slip stitches. Now we're going to knit 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to repeat the first 3 stitches, which is purl 1, knit 1, and purl 1. Row 14, we're going to slip 1, and then we're going to knit 1. We're going to slip the next stitch purlwise with the yarn in the back. We're going to knit 3, 1, 2, 3. So this column here, this stitch here is going to start another column of slip stitches. So we're going to slip purlwise with the yarn in the back. The stitch next to the last is KFB as usual, and then slip 1 knitwise. Row 15, purl 1, knit 2, and now this is our slip stitch on the other side, our new column of slip stitches. Make sure your yarn is in the front and slip purlwise. Knit 3, 1, 2, 3, another slip stitch purlwise with yarn in the front, knit the next stitch, and then purl the last stitch. As I mentioned, you could place a stitch marker on the front side of your work, but once it gets a little bit bigger, you can tell which side is front and which side is back. Okay, row 16. This is going to be the start of your repeat. The repeat is rows 16 through 23. So 16, you're going to slip 1 knitwise. So I'm going to drop my marker just because I marked the front of my work here. Okay, so row 16, we're just going to knit until the last 2 stitches. Next stitch, KFB, slip knitwise. Row 17, purl the first stitch. Okay, so the repeat is going to be knit 3, purl 1 until the last 2 stitches. 1, 2, 3, purl, repeat, knit 3, purl 1. So here are the last 2 stitches. It's end with knit 1, purl 1. Okay, so now you can see that we're starting to see the 2 columns of the slip stitches here, and then the garter stitches are in between. Row 18, slip 1, knit 1. We're going to slip with yarn in back purlwise. This is the slip stitch column. Knit 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we're slipping this column, so slip with the yarn in back, slip purlwise, knit 2, and then we're going to KFB and slip the last stitch as if to knit. Row 19, purl 1, and then we're going to slip the next stitch. We're going to start another column of these slip stitches. Again, yarn is in the front, slip purlwise. The repeat is knit 3, slip 1 until the last 2 stitches. Okay, I'm going to slip with the yarn in the front, and last 2 stitches, knit and purl. Row 20, slip 1 knitwise. We're going to knit until the last 2 stitches, Okay, KFB. And then slip one knitwise. Row 21, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. Now we're going to repeat knit 3 and purl 1 until the last 2 stitches. So knit 3, purl 1, knit 3, purl 1, and then we're going to knit and then purl the last 2 stitches. Row 22, we're going to slip 1 knitwise, knit 1, then we're going to slip the next stitch with the yarn in the back. We're going to knit 3, slip the next stitch with the yarn in the back, knit 3, slip the next stitch with the yarn in the back, last 2 stitches, KFB in the next, and then slip the last stitch knitwise. Row 23, purl 1, knit 2, 1, 2. So this is the stitch we slipped. Make sure your working yarn is in the front. Slip purlwise. The repeat is knit 3, slip 1, knit 3, so that's 3. Slip purlwise, make sure your yarn is in the front. Knit 3, slip 1 purlwise. Last 2 stitches, knit and purl. Okay, so now you're going to repeat rows 16 to 23 until you're happy with your size. So in the Tera Shawl, I repeated those rows until I had 77 stitches on my needles. And the size for that was about 46 inches by 40 by 65. Okay, so I'm going to repeat those rows until I'm happy with my size. Okay, so here is what it's starting to look like. Okay, so you have your columns here with these slip stitches and the garter stitches in between. So the pattern says to stop when you have 77 stitches on your needles. Now I only stopped there because I was running out of yarn, so really you can keep going until you're happy with the size of your shawl. It doesn't have to be 77 stitches, it could be wherever you want. Okay, so once you have your 77 stitches, again, as I mentioned, it could be any number. Just you keep going until you're happy with the size of your shawl. For this tutorial, I'm just going to stop here and I'm going to cast off. And I mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter where you stop. I'm just going to stop after I've worked slip stitches, and now I'm on the right side. So now that I'm ready to cast off, I am no longer going to slip my stitches like I've been doing for the first and last stitch. I'm just going to go ahead and knit 2 stitches. Okay, so with this needle, you want to grab this stitch here, and then it helps if you place your finger here so that this loop doesn't fall off. You pass it over that loop and then off the needle. Okay. Now you're going to knit the next stitch, and then you're going to pass this loop here over this loop and then drop it off the needle. So you're basically repeating those steps until you're at the end. Just knit 1, pass this loop here over this one and drop it. And then just repeat all the way across. Okay, I have 3 more stitches left. Again, we are not slipping the first and last stitch. We're just going to repeat what we've been doing until we have 1 loop left. Okay, so now you're just going to cut your yarn and then weave in your ends. Okay, now you're ready to add the tassels. Okay, so let's make our tassel. So I used a tassel maker, but you can use anything that's the size you want your tassel. So my tassel maker was about 4 inches. That's perfect. So that's 4 inches. And you can use a cardboard, your cell phone, anything that's the size you want. So if you don't have a tassel maker, you just want to grab a piece of cardboard. I'm going to use this piece here. It's one of the flaps from one of the shipping boxes. So measure the length you want your tassel. This one's 5 inches. I used a 4-inch tassel maker, so the one I used on the shawl is a little bit shorter, but for this sample I'm going to just measure 5 inches. So I'm going to mark where the 0 is, and then 1 inch from the edge, mark there as well, so the 4 inches right there. So I'm going to cut this here. So if you're planning to make one that you're keeping and you want it to be pretty, then you can cut this part off. I really just ripped this off my box. So right here, you want it to cut a small slit, okay, from the edge. So this is 5 inches and this is 1 inch. So grab 2 strands. This is about probably 12 inches each. Okay, so I'm going to place a strand here. That's going to be the piece that you attach to the project. So in this case, you'll use this to attach to the shawl. I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to place it in here in this little slit that I made, and I'm just going to pull it to the left. Okay, so now I'm going to start wrapping the cardboard, and I'm going to wrap it 25 times. You can wrap it as many times as you want for the thickness of the tassel. So that's 1, going all the way around is 1, 2. You want to make sure it's loose so that there's no tension, otherwise when you cut it, it's going to shrink. 3. Okay, so that is 25 times around my cardboard. I'm going to cut that. Okay, so the piece that you place into the slit right here, you're going to want to grab the other side, okay? Okay, so this is the strand that I place on the slit here. This thing fell off, but it's part of what I wrapped. So here's that strand that was in this slit here. Okay, it's this one and this one. So now you're going to tie that. So based on how big you want this part, that's how far you're going to cut your slit. For me, it was 1 inch. So I'm going to tie that once, and I had my son place his finger there while I tied it again. So, but he's not here, so I'll just do that. And then I'm going to leave it like that. Now I'm going to cut the edges on the bottom. You can slide this off your cardboard to do, or you can just cut it right from your cardboard. I'm going to trim it so I don't really care if it's off or on. Now you can slide your tassel off. So remember we had this strand on the top. That's going to be the part that you attach to your tassel. So before I do that, I'm going to tie a couple of knots here as well. Okay, so whoops. I want to make sure it's on the very top here. Okay, there's 1 and 2. So there's the top part of my tassel. And here is the bottom part. So part of this came undone when I was working. And then this was the piece I tied right here. So I'm just going to trim the bottom of this so that it's a little bit straighter. So I'm squeezing it together and just trimming it. You can trim this more when you're done if you want to fix this end part here. Okay, so now you have your tassel. As I mentioned, my actual tassel was smaller or shorter, so you can tell it's a little bit shorter. I used a 4-inch tassel maker. So all I did was find the corners of my shawl, and then I just threaded the strands up here into the shawl. And this is super bulky, so it works just with your fingers. You can just run it through, and then once you get it in there, tie a couple of knots to secure it. And then what I did is I took tapestry needle and placed these on it, and I ran it back through here and then trimmed it down here. It's up to you how you want to secure that. So I did the same thing for all of these corners. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that notification button so that you will be notified every time I post a video. I'll see you next time.